Greetings everyone, my name's David Witten. I'm the coordinator of keyboard studies here at the Cali School of Music at Montclair State University. And along with my colleague, Professor Dorothy Taubman, we're presenting the 10th annual Taubman Festival. This honors the work, the piano teaching of Dorothy Taubman. Now usually we, teaching them the Taubman approach, we take the elements one by one and then illustrate with certain excerpts of the piano literature. Today I'm going to do actually the reverse. I'm going to take one particular piece of Chopin, the D-flat Major Waltz, and as I go along I'm going to introduce certain tips and techniques that will help using the Taubman approach. Of course it's this piece. Now I also want to mention that anytime you want a deeper understanding of a piece of music, you want to look not only at the music itself, but imagine what the composer did not write. In other words, imagine how a mediocre, everyday, average, ordinary, run-of-the-mill garden variety composer might have written the same piece, and then compare the two and look back at what the gifted composer wrote, and then you will really be impressed, amazed, and even astonished. Now, before I give examples of that comparison of a mediocre composer and the great composer, I do want to get right to the nuts and bolts of this particular waltz, some of the physical challenges. Now, you know it starts with that four-note motto, which comes 8 or 9 times in a row every time it appears. Now, actually, if you study the music very well, you'll notice it's really built on 2 notes. It's not simply a 4-note motto. It's a 2-note trill, a hyper trill, a trill on steroids. Instead of a trill, of course, would be, you take the 2 notes and then you start to realize they're embellished on either side. Just revealed for you the origin of the 4-note motto. It's a trill. Now let's take a look at the music more closely now. Now in this image here on the slide, I've circled for you in red the 2 notes, the A flat and the B flat, so you get an idea. And actually, there was a student of Chopin and a friend of his named Wilhelm von Lentz, and years later he quoted Chopin concerning that opening of this waltz. Chopin told him, "It should unroll like a ball of yarn." Now in this slide I've added a little bit of dynamics that is going to help the music. You remember I told you that the 2-note trill is ornamented on either side. So this one, the C, D flat, is kind of an appoggiatura. It's a leaning note. So you want to give a little more sound. And just to make sure you understand the gesture needed to get that sound, watch my wrist more than my fingers. I'm doing a kind of counterclockwise circle. Okay, if you tried to do it the old school, the Clementi, Kalkbrenner way of teaching, where you keep your arm very still, and you try to use your fingers as little pistons going up and down, you would get, it's about as musical as a typewriter, but make a curvilinear motion. In this case, a counterclockwise circle. Now, notice how lucky we are that the thumb gets to play on the white note. Chopin loved the keys, the tonalities that featured mostly black notes. You may not know, but he sent his niece. He learned that his little 8-year-old niece was starting to take piano lessons back in Poland. So he sent her the B major scale. Of course, B major features all the black notes. You can look at it at the next slide, but notice, you're going to notice the thumb is always lower. And it was so important for him to have the thumb lower and the longer fingers raised just a little, what Taubman would call a forward shift. I'll show you on the next slide. This slide is an image of the page that Chopin sent to his niece, the little 8-year-old girl who was starting piano, and he wrote out the B major scale, 2 octaves, and he put the fingering on it. Now notice the 1, the thumb, is written below the note, but 2, 3 are written above. Those are the black keys. Then the next E, the 1 is below, 2, 3, 4 above, and he did that consistently all the way up. As he gets to the top, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, oops, Chopin goes, oops. He realizes he started writing the numbers only above. He scratches them out, scratches out the 1s, and rewrites it below the note. This is proof of how he was committed to having the black keys slightly higher and the thumb level on the white notes. I love this slide. And also please notice the Polish writing just above the scale. I can't even begin to pronounce Polish, but the translation is the elbow level with the white keys. The elbow level with the white keys. And that happens to be a basic tenet of and principle of Mrs. Taubman's approach to sitting at the piano. It's something a Taubman student learns first week, even before they play a single note. So there you have Chopin endorsing that, stating it. Now again, going back to the very opening of the waltz, it's the second measure that always intrigued me. When I first started learning this piece, I didn't understand why Chopin doesn't go right away. He has this, and he hasn't quite gotten into the unrolling of the ball of yarn that was mentioned by Lenz. And in fact, he gets so excited that it becomes reduced to the 4 notes. And of course, that's what gives the impetus, the group of 4 notes versus the pulse of 3 in the left hand, of course. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. But first as I promised, I wanted to suggest how a mediocre, boring, run-of-the-mill garden variety composer might have written a waltz using the second measure. Something like this. So it would be okay, it's nice, but it's not as ingenious as Chopin's after that initial measure to just take the 4 notes, the 2 beats, and rub it against the group of 3. Sorry. And that gives them enough energy, enough entropy to defy gravity and scoot up there to B flat. 1 note beyond where we were hoping for. We were expecting just, right? A flat. And then you'd be finished. Now in the second line of the waltz, Keep in mind that the groups of two rubbing against the groups of three, unlike that mediocre composer, the groups of three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So you have the cross rhythm, or in some centuries it was called iso rhythm. You have the conflict. It makes the music very interesting and gives it a spin. Now, as you're coming up, not only well, the little circle, the counterclockwise circle I told you earlier, when you get up to the B flat, which is 6, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3 in the scale of D flat. That was actually a trademark of Chopin to go to 6 as a preparation for 5. So technically, you want to play fourth finger. I've seen some people try to play 5, and it can be bangy, or you might slide off. 4 is very safe, and then you can do the counterclockwise circle again. Sorry. And the feeling of that arrival going too far after the energy. It's spinning, 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 and then you arrive. That encourages you to wait just a little before continuing. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now in English language, we're lucky because the word one has this expandable wah. 1, 2, 3. We're not locked into 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We're not locked into that immovable pulse. Some languages are more fortunate than others in that respect. But musically, it's very healthy to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and so on. Now, I've just mentioned the idea of defying gravity as a musical concept. And it's interesting that in the 20th century, two very important pianists both spoke about this concept. One was Dinu Lipati, the renowned Romanian pianist, and the other was the great American pianist Leon Fleischer. His teaching always included mentioning our primal relationship with gravity. And here's a quote from his speech to the graduating class at the New England Conservatory of Music in 1996. He talked about beats are like springs, impulses that carry the music on and on. The eagle searches out a draft of hot air and rises from the earth, catches it on the tip of its wing, and rises for miles and miles, soaring and dipping without once flapping its wings. That is the manifestation of musical line. So he understood, and of course Chopin understood, how important it was to defy gravity. Now I have an image of a discus thrower. I was thinking about what would work the best for this particular phrase in the Chopin music. So I'm going to play that for you. I matched up the music with the discus thrower's disc. Now, as Chopin has experimented with defying gravity, soaring up there, discus throwing, dog chasing its tail, so on, finally it's time to come home. Come home to the tonic of D flat. And you reach home. However, I lied. That's not what Chopin wrote. That's what a mediocre, everyday garden variety composer might have written. What I did was created a chromatic scale, which is a perfectly acceptable and reasonable way to reach your goal of the tonic. But Chopin, much more interesting, he opens up some parachutes as he's coming down, falling, and kind of slams on the brakes, or as I said, opens a parachute and writes and very elegantly comes down. Here I've highlighted the spot of the cadence with those little parachutes highlighted, pointing to it with a blue arrow. So I want to make sure you understand the scale. Of course, the scale is Chopin's favorite all black keys scale. And right here you do a little, what would be a Baroque ornament. Again, it's a counterclockwise tiny little circle, and then you get to go left, right, you end with single rotations. White, black makes it even more simple. White, black, and then honoring the requirements of the left hand, you lift up a little bit out of the way. See? So you coordinate your hands, and they're interdependent on each other. Now, as I've already mentioned concerning the laws of physics, especially gravity, when the musical line wants to go up, it needs a special spin. It needs to overcome gravity, to defy gravity, and spin up and up and up and try to reach its highest note. And on the other hand, gravity will kick in, and as you saw from this two-octave descent, it falls, and Chopin must open a little parachute to have a gentle landing. Now let's jump to the end of this piece, which has more than 3-octave fall. And beyond the normal laws of physics, which I love and trust very much, I think in music it's often more appropriate to look beyond the laws of physics and go to the cartoon laws of physics. And here you have an image from the many Wile E. Coyote cartoons where this character is learning the hard way, the gravity lesson. And if you read the 10 cartoon laws of physics, you'll know that cartoon law number 1 reads, any body suspended in space will remain in space until made aware of its situation. And the other law that's appropriate for this waltz is the cartoon law number 5. All principles of gravity are negated by fear. So we're going to watch, I've taken a cartoon where Mr. Dog and Bugs Bunny are falling from a great height, and they're in great danger, and their fear finally kicks in and brings them to a slow and safe landing. Well, I'm sorry we're running out of time. We didn't even talk about the beautiful middle section of this waltz, so I encourage you to study it. And by the way, please notice it's in the same key as the outer sections. It's in D-flat as well. But I do want to draw your attention before ending. This particular edition we've been using that you see now on the screen, there's TR, trill, above the A-flat. And none of the other editions, I've looked at 10 or 12 different editions, none of them have the trill. This is in the Paderewski edition. And the real value of Paderewski edition, by the way,
is if you open up the back pages and look at the commentary, and there you'll see that the editorial committee has a big discussion about particular measures, and you'll find out that the trill was written in there because of a very special student of Chopin named Camille Dubois. Here's an image of Camille Dubois. She was one of Chopin's best students and studied with him for at least 5 years. And fortunately, we have all the scores that she used when she studied. So there's many marks in the music. Some of it's by Chopin, some of it's by herself in pencil. And over that first A flat, you'll see the word quatre mesures, 4 measures, and underneath trill. So that's suggesting that Chopin allowed or even approved of someone starting the waltz with a 4-measure trill even before the written measures get started. Now I searched for many recordings, and the only recording I found where someone does play a 4-measure trill is an old recording from 1905 by Alexander Mikhailovsky, who was a student of Karl Mikuli, who was a student of Chopin. So it's the 2 generations away. So that's one important thing you should know about Camille Dubois. The other important thing is in a letter, she lived until 1907, and in a letter from her to Niecks, who was the first biographer of Chopin, she refers to this waltz as La Valse du Petit Chien, which is French for the little doggy waltz. So she doesn't mention that it's the dog chasing its tail. That legend came up later. But it's interesting that she mentioned, and it's also interesting that if you buy this waltz in France, it will probably say La Valse du Petit Chien. If you buy it in China, I'll show you how it looks in Chinese. So here, as I promised, here's the Chinese. It says Little Doggy Waltz, and in French, La Valse au Petit Chien, the Little Dog Waltz. In English, it's often called the Minute Waltz, but that's not the English word minute. It's more like minute, small. That's how it was also published in France as Minute Waltz. Now, concerning the legend of the doggy. Now, there was an unsubstantiated legend that the waltz was created as the result of a dare when Georges Sand was the woman who was Chopin's partner for 9 years. And by the way, she owned 2 dogs, and Chopin loved those dogs. One was named Marquis, the other one was named Dib, D-I-B. Anyway, the legend is that she dared Chopin, she challenged Chopin to set the movement of her dog Marquis chasing his tail to music. And by the way, this particular painting you're seeing was done by Eugène Lambert, who was an artist in France the same years that Chopin and Georges Sand were living, and he was actually a frequent guest in their summer home in Nohant. And he did paint this doggy in 1854, Chopin had died already, but he was still a frequent visitor, and this dog was in Nohant. So it's very likely that this is the dog who had been chasing his tail. And Georges Sand had 2 children, and when they were teenagers, they started putting on little puppet plays and theater, and the dogs would get so excited and they'd jump around and dance with the people in the play. And Chopin even helped out by providing music, and there is a surviving musical sketch by Chopin, and it's not published, but on the top of the manuscript he wrote Galop Marquis. So it's a gallop for the doggy named Marquis. So I want to play the Galop Marquis. This is the little sketch that Chopin wrote honoring the little doggy Marquis. And actually, in the second little section of this piece, he wrote above there, Partie Dib. So the dib, the second dog, gets a chance to be in there too. This was written just about the same time as the D-flat Major Waltz. The dog chasing its tail. So here we go. I don't know when else you would have a chance to hear that piece, so I'm happy to play it for you. So thank you very much for your attention for this talk about Chopin and the D-flat Major Waltz. Thank you very much.